Hello, and welcome to today's live this evening, which is all on photosynthesis. And I've gone for a bit like the dark, cozy autumnal vibes because it really fits with the theme of the day, which has basically been rainy, cold. It feels like we're now properly in September, which I suppose we are. And hopefully you can still see everything okay because this is obviously a lit up screen. But that way also we don't get any shadows, so I'm hoping that'll be quite good in terms of you being able to see everything. So we're going to be going through photosynthesis for AQA, A-level biology, but it does link to other exam boards as well. So if you are an AQA, don't panic. What I'm going through is relevant for all exam boards, even though these are my AQA, A-level biology notes. As I said, it will work for everyone. So these lives are every single Thursday at 8 p.m, completely for free, streamed across all of my social media platforms simultaneously. And what you'll see me using is these are my A-level notes, and I'm going to flick between explaining the theory with my A-level notes, and then we can test our knowledge with my active recall workbook. So learning / understanding the content, and then we'll be testing, can you remember it, do you fully understand it? So that's the aim of these sessions. I'm going to be looking across the different chats because I do have this on Instagram, YouTube, and on TikTok. I'm just going to quickly check it's all going okay on YouTube because I've checked the other two platforms. Yep, all looks good. Right, so let's start then. This first little bit that we can see here, there's not actually loads on this in the spec. It's more that it links to one of the required practicals linked to the idea of photosynthetic pigments and looking at the different photosynthetic pigments you have in chlorophyll when you do your chromatography. So you normally get application questions or synoptic questions, either linked to the structure of a chloroplast, which is year 12 content, but it's relevant again in year 13 because you need to know that it is a double membrane bound organelles with the outer membrane and the inner membrane. Then you've got these foldings here, which are the thylakoid membranes, and stacks of those that look like these green coins. Those are known as grana for plural or granum for singular. And that is the site of the light-dependent reactions, which is the first part of photosynthesis. You've then got this fluid or aqueous fluid center known as the stroma, and that is where the light-independent reactions occur. So sometimes you might get questions about adaptations. The main one that is relevant here is the highly folded thylakoid membrane creates a large surface area to hold lots of photosynthetic pigments like chlorophyll, so it can absorb lots of light energy and therefore increase the rate of the light-dependent reactions. Now, you can also get questions linked to the required practical about the idea of the different photosynthetic pigments that you can get, and you don't actually have to remember any of them off by heart. But what you could get is a graph like this where they show you the different pigments, and this one I've got chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and it would be absorption, or maybe it might be photosynthesis rate, but it's normally absorption on the y-axis, and then the wavelength of light on the x-axis. And what this shows you is the advantage of a plant having multiple pigments is you get a greater range of wavelengths of light being absorbed, and therefore overall more light energy is absorbed. And that's then needed for the light-dependent reactions. So we can see here, if we just had chlorophyll A, none of this wavelength would get absorbed. And if we just had chlorophyll B, you wouldn't get very much light at this wavelength or this wavelength being absorbed. So by having both of those, more light energy is absorbed. And in fact, it's not just those two chlorophylls. Often you get to see the xanthophylls and the carotenes as well, which are more in the yellow and orangey parts. Okay, so that is our chlorophyll. So let's just quickly go to the active recall text. I was going to say textbook, but it's not a textbook, it's online. So the question we've got here is chlorophyll absorbs light energy for LDR, which is light dependent reactions. Use the graph to explain the advantage of a plant having multiple pigments. So that's what I'm saying. This is your typical application question linked to this. What is the advantage of having those multiple pigments? So for this one, let's just add in more wavelengths of light absorbed. So more light energy. Absorbed. That then means there's more energy for the light dependent reactions. I wouldn't abbreviate that in the exam though, just because I'm running out of space. Can I just check if the chat box is working on YouTube? Because I can't see any comments, and that is very unusual on YouTube. That normally in the live there's loads of comments and I can't see any, which makes me think, have I put something on the settings that's made it not possible for you to chat? Let me see. Oh, someone has said hi. Maybe YouTube were just feeling quiet today. Maybe that was it, because I can see lots of comments coming in on Instagram. But I didn't see many on... Okay, people are there on YouTube. Like, yes, we're here. We were just not saying anything. That's cool, because I hadn't answered any questions. But let's ask this then to all of the chat boxes. This is A-level. Someone said, is this GCSE or A-level? It's A-level biology photosynthesis. Where does the light-dependent reaction occur? So think back to if you were here a few minutes ago when I had the chloroplast picture. Where in the chloroplast do the light-dependent reactions occur? I'm going to have a look across the different chats to see who we get an answer from first. It's normally TikTok I get an answer from first. Let me just click there. Yeah, I can see Alex has got it, Katie's got it. Elise, loads of people on TikTok, but there isn't a delay on the TikTok. Yeah, Instagram, we've got A. Walker's got it. Chloe has. And Naomi, Dexter, Cordell on YouTube. Brilliant. So you could either say for this, thylakoid membrane, or they will accept grana or the singular granum. So any of those are accepted on the mark scheme. What are the three key reactions in the light-dependent reaction? Now, we haven't gone over this yet, so let's go back to the notes now to have a look at the light-dependent reactions. So this is the first stage of photosynthesis. It happens on the thylakoid membrane, or grana, granum, and the key purpose of this stage is to create ATP and reduced NADP. That is the whole essential point of this stage, because those two molecules are needed in the light independent stage. So that's the second stage in photosynthesis. So this stage uses light energy, and that contributes to the creation of ATP and reduced NADP. And if you haven't come across that yet, that is a coenzyme. And coenzymes in photosynthesis and respiration, they pick up molecules, usually hydrogen, that you learn about, and then they can deliver it to a later stage of the reaction. Someone said, would this help for AS biology because I'm in year 12? It will. It might not make loads of sense. There is some here information that kind of links to cells, but this is a year 13 topic, so it might be a bit confusing. But each stage I am explaining, and then we're doing the questions, so you might still be able to access it a little bit. So our three stages are photolysis of water, photoionization of chlorophyll, and chemiosmosis. So those are our three reactions happening in the light-dependent reactions. And if we just go through what each of these mean, photolysis of water. The best way I think to remember this is to break down the word. Photo, as I've written here, that always means light. So photosynthesis, that is synthesizing food or glucose using energy. light energy, specifically the photo. And here we've got photolysis. Photo always means light, lysis always means to split. So if we've got photolysis of water, that means light energy is splitting water. And that's all this stage is. As the light energy shines on the leaf, light energy is absorbed by those photosynthetic pigments, such as chlorophyll. And if enough light energy is absorbed, that energy can break the bonds in water and split it into oxygen, electrons, and protons. Those two should be superscript. No, it should be H2O, and that should be O2. So for photolysis of water, you do need to know what it means, but you do also need to know that you get oxygen, electrons, and protons. Now that oxygen is released as a byproduct. It is not used in photosynthesis. So that's a byproduct. We don't talk about it again. However, the electrons, those do get used. They're going to replace electrons lost in chlorophyll, which we'll talk about shortly. And then the hydrogen ions, also known as protons, are used to reduce that coenzyme, NADP. So we get reduced NADP. And it makes a proton gradient, which is going to be relevant later. But for now, you just need to know that it's splitting of water into oxygen, electrons, and protons. And it's the electrons and protons that are of interest. Then the next bit, photoionization of chlorophyll. So again, we've got photo, so that means it's to do with light. Into the chat box, what does ionization mean? Because you do this at GCSE chemistry. A few people were questioning about notes. So these notes, you can get free samples. I know some of you are saying that, yeah, you were talking about should you get free notes or should you buy them. Obviously, it does depend on what your budget is. The advantage of paid for notes over free ones, all the free ones I've seen are basically the specification put through ChatGPT or added a tiny bit more. So you'll get the content, but you won't get it explained. My notes are more premium in price. I do realise that, but that's because every year I update them and I spend hours on them. You get, I haven't actually got it here to show you in this section, but you get the key terms, key marking points highlighted on every page. You also get examiner tips from actual examiners, like things you should and shouldn't say. You get essay links, you get the topic summary, and there's 10 questions and answers at the end of every subtopic. So it's more than just like a textbook or notes. It's got like insider examiner knowledge as well. But yes, they do come at a price. But yeah, you can get free sample of those. You get 10 pages for free, whether it's GCSE, A-level, and that's for AQA, OCR, and Cambridge International. If you did want that free sample, just go over to my Instagram and comment free sample on any of my posts, and you'll get an automatic DM with the link in. But back to this, I just saw some of you were talking about it, so I just thought I'd give you my viewpoint on that and the advantages and disadvantages of free and paid notes. Okay, ionization. Did we get any answers? Let me go over to Instagram. Yeah, brilliant. Wondering, Umi, I don't know if that's how I pronounce it, the gain or loss of electrons. So yeah, that would be the loss or gain of the electrons so that you get an ion. And what happens here is light energy, which is absorbed by the chlorophyll, is going to cause electrons to be lost from the chlorophyll. So chlorophyll has become ionized. However, AQA are so specific with the way that you phrase this. So if you have not got this in your notes already and you've covered this topic or you don't have flashcards on it, this is so important for the terminology to get the mark in the exam. You have to say that the light energy that the chlorophyll absorbs makes the electrons in the chlorophyll excited, and that then causes them to move up an energy level. Those are the two key things that they say. So rather than just saying light energy is absorbed and that causes an electron to be lost, they wouldn't give you the mark for that. You have to say light energy is absorbed by the chlorophyll. That causes the electrons in chlorophyll to be excited and they raise up or move up an energy level, which basically means they've been lost from the chlorophyll. So that means chlorophyll is now ionized. So it's been oxidized because it's lost an electron. The final stage, excuse me, is chemiosmosis. This is the big one. All linked to this diagram here, which if this is the first time you're coming across this diagram, it is a little bit overwhelming because there is so much information here. But what we have is, in terms of the chloroplast, let me just sketch it up here. These are my stacks of grana. We're told that this is the thylakoid lumen. That's the chloroplast stroma. And I don't think it's labelled, but this is the thylakoid membrane. So basically, on my diagram, this, if I just colour it in green, that inside is the thylakoid lumen. This here, that I'll just sketch in red, that is the stroma, and the black lines are the membrane. So we are essentially focusing on this cross section. We've got the thylakoid membrane, the thylakoid lumen, and the stroma. So that is what we are zooming in and having a look at here. Thylakoid lumen, thylakoid membrane, and that is a stroma. And that thylakoid membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, like all biological membranes. Phospholipid bilayer with proteins embedded within it. But the proteins embedded within it make up the electron transfer chain. And also this protein here is the enzyme ATP synthase. So what happens is that the water that we can see down here, that is water in photolysis of water, like we just learned, that gets split into oxygen, protons, and electrons. The electrons, as we said, those are going to replace electrons lost in chlorophyll, and this protein here contains the chlorophyll pigment. You don't actually need to know lots of the names on here for AQA. Anything that I say is what you need to know. Everything else is just extra. Like you don't need to know PS2, don't need to know that, don't need to know that. Just get rid of all that extra for you. And those electrons are replacing the electrons that are lost from the photoionization of chlorophyll. The chlorophyll electrons that were lost, they are moving from protein to protein to protein. And that is our electron transfer chain. They're being passed along this chain of proteins. And as they do that, they release energy. That energy is used to pump protons through to this side. And as a result, we end up with lots of protons on this side of the membrane because they're being produced in photolysis of water and they're being pumped across from the stroma. And because we have so many protons or hydrogen ions, we create a concentration gradient. But that concentration gradient is called an electrochemical gradient because of that charge. So those hydrogen ions then move by facilitated diffusion down their concentration gradient. But the protein channel that they can fit through is the enzyme ATP synthase. So as the protons move down the concentration gradient, that results in ATP being made. So that's how ATP is made. We also said that reduced NADP, which is the same thing as NADPH, because the hydrogen is a proton and an electron, so if you gain it, it becomes reduced. And that becomes reduced NADP because it picks up the electrons at the end of the electron transfer chain. It also picks up the protons as they've passed through. And the electron and proton makes that hydrogen, and makes reduced NADP. So that is how, in chemiosmosis, that's the name of this final stage, we get ATP and reduced NADP being created. So if we then have a look at this bit here, so what are the three key reactions in the light-dependent reactions? So I'm going to go to the chat box on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm just going to have a quick stand up so I can see on YouTube. Someone said, could you call it a proton gradient in the exam, or does it need to be called electrochemical gradient? I've only ever seen an electrochemical gradient on there. How does it carry electrons if it's only H plus / protons? James on TikTok, when you said how does it carry electrons, which molecule are you referring to in that question? I'm just going to wait to see if he's responded. Oh, NAD. So it'd be NADP for photosynthesis. And you've said, how does it pick up electrons? Let me go back to the original question. So how does NADP carry electrons if it's only H plus? Okay, so it's not actually just H plus that it picks up. So NADP is picking up this electron and this proton. And if you've got a proton plus an electron, sorry, that's not very clear. That is what a hydrogen atom is. It's a proton and an electron. So that NADP gains the electron, gains the proton, and it's now NADPH, which is actually the same thing as reduced NADP. There is slightly more sophisticated chemistry to it than that, but not that you need to know for A-level biology. Okay, so back to this question. It was, what are the 3 key reactions in the light-dependent reactions? That was these 3 here that we just talked about: photolysis of water, photoionization of chlorophyll, and chemiosmosis. And just to point out, the mark scheme is really particular, that you don't say photolysis, you do have to say of water. You don't just say photoionization, you do have to say of chlorophyll. This is really picky, but getting into this habit now and knowing what these key marking points are, that will make the difference between you thinking you got the mark and not, which really adds up across an exam. If you can use these tips that I'm going through every every Thursday, adding that to your notes, or just highlight it in your notes, or if you've got my notes, just annotating as you go, it can make such a huge difference to your grade overall, just gaining marks here and there along the way. Okay, right, then we had write the symbol equation for photolysis. So this was our photolysis of water. Now this one here I'm going to do into the chat box, and then I'll show you that one there. Well, that's quite a tricky one to do the symbol equation when, well, I suppose on my notes I didn't have that superscript either. Well, it wasn't super, it was subscript. So symbol equation for photolysis of water. See some answers coming in. That is what we had here. I'm actually just going to erase some of this now because it's getting a bit confusing. Scribble that out. This is our equation. So you need to know it's water split into O2, electrons, hydrogen ions, or protons. Yeah, excellent. I can see someone had that on, quite a few of you got it coming in on YouTube. Okay, so what is the time? 20 past. Right, describe photoionization of chlorophyll. Oh, do you remember those 2 key phrases that I said for photoionization of chlorophyll? What was it that I was saying? The mark scheme is so particular that you have to say those 2 key phrases to get the mark. I'm going to have a look-see on TikTok. So I can see Nord said light's absorbed and an electron is excited. So yeah, you definitely get 1 mark there for saying the electrons are excited. So the light energy is absorbed by the chlorophyll. There's normally a mark for emphasising the chlorophyll. I'm not going through a required practical in this session, no, so I'm just going through probably actually just the light dependent reactions because it's nearly half past already, so we won't get on to the light independent. I can't remember which way around I said it now. I've done the light dependent. We won't have time for light independent. Right, let's see. Anyone else got that? So far, oh yeah, move up an energy level. Excellent, George. That is it. So we should have light energy absorbed by chlorophyll. I'm going to say energy excites electrons, and then electrons move up or raise, then energy level. So yeah, it is oxidation. Some of you are asking that. Oxidation. Someone said, is this a teaching lesson or recall lesson? It's a bit of both. I've been teaching it, and then we jump over to the questions just to check you've understood it and can recall it. So I do a little bit of both. Okay, then to finish, we are using the diagram to describe chemiosmosis in 4 key steps. So I'm going to talk about the electrons first of all. I don't have much space, so I'm going to say electrons. You would have to write that out on the exam just because I'm running out of space here. Electrons move along. Again, I'm abbreviating this, but you would have to write it out on the exam. Electron transfer chain. And the electrons come from photolysis of water and photoionization of chlorophyll. So that would be my first part. Second thing then is electrons release energy to pump protons. From stroma to thylakoid lumen. This creates, sorry about my writing. When I talk and write at the same time, I try and write really quickly and it ends up just being this awful scrawl. This creates electrochemical gradient. Then the last one I'm going to talk about is this and this. So I'd then say the protons move down their electrochemical gradient through ATP synthase to make ATP, and NADP picks up electrons at the end of the electron transfer chain and protons to make reduced NADP. So that'd be our final thing. I know I've not fully written it there, I described it instead out loud. Also, just to help you, you have the coenzyme NADP in photosynthesis, but you have the coenzyme NAD in respiration. The way to remember it is think P for photosynthesis. So P for photosynthesis, NADP. Okay, so my voice is almost giving in there. Because I've had like a cold for, I don't know, solidly since June. Or it's not one cold, it's multiple colds. And the more I talk, it like sets me off coughing. So I'm going to leave it there because we're at almost a half-hour point. And these are always every Thursday, 8 p.m. And it is normally 20 to 30 minutes. Although I will not be doing one next Thursday because I am away in Tunisia. So I won't be doing a live next Thursday. It'll be back the following Thursday. So I will see you hopefully in 2 weeks' time. If you've got any requests, it'll be a year 12 topic next time because this one's year 13. Any requests, this does get recorded and saved on both my YouTube channel and my Instagram. So comment on the recording what you would like next time and I'll do my best to go with the majority. But that is it for this session. Hope you found it helpful and I'll see you in a couple of weeks for a live. But also I do have videos going live on Instagram, TikTok every day and on YouTube every single week as well. But that is it.